I had something in the morning in Delhi.
You know Mr. Ganguly? Ashok Ganguly?
Hi.
Everybody is feeling very good about me.
I said, let me come and say hi to you before anyone else did. Yeah, sure. How are you waiting?
बहुत अच्छे आप अच्छे हैं I hope you recognize
Of course, that's why I'll come up first to say.
Thank you. नमस्कार
Hi, Kumar, how are you?
Long time.
You don't need that.
I don't know. This is Birla. Of course. I'm on this. Yeah. My grandparents. Once there was something in this little hall. Evenings are cold, but
Written moments of opening envelopes, etc. But you know who the winner is. So may we have the house lights on now? And could I request Mr. Ashok Advani to escort our chief guest, Mr. Arun Jaitley, to the main table. And Shri Sunil Mittal, previous year's awardee, and this fellow sir.
once we settle down.
The selection procedure is apparently kept entirely confidential, but Sunil Mittal will tell you more about that a little later. The panel every year consists of very eminent people with proven track records, and some of them have never met each other before. Yet, despite that, almost every year there is unanimity on who the businessman of the year should be. And every year again, for 22 years, there's been wide public acceptance that the panel has made the right choice. Across business executives, across businessmen, across industrialists. That's unanimous every year. The focus each year is on the winner's success during that particular year. And the winners continue to succeed, like Mr. Ratan Tata, Mr. Deepak Pai, Mr. Mukesh Ambani, and I mentioned just a few. It has never been awarded twice, but then again, it's never been awarded to someone as young as 36. So who knows what the future will tell. Ladies and gentlemen, for the year 2003, it's the new face, rather the young face, of the old economy, or rather, shall I say, the durable economy. Shri Kumar Mangalam Birla. And now I bring to the others.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Shri Kumar Birla, Mrs. Sarla Birla, Mrs. Ramshri Birla, we're honored to have you all with us on this happy occasion. My own warm welcome on behalf of Business India and all our colleagues at Business India for being with us this evening to honor Kumar Mangalam Birla on this momentous occasion for Businessman of the Year 2003. We are in 2004. We are slightly late, but we had to make some adjustments, I'd say for family reasons, to allow Mrs. Nirja Birla to be with us today, and to allow Kumar's grandparents to be with us today. We don't have the next generation with us, but that's the reason why we delayed a little. And I think between family, marriages, halls, it becomes a little awkward to find the right date, but we've found the right date, and we are indeed very happy to have all of you with us. We, if I may say so, we deliberately keep this event somewhat solemn, at least to begin with, because if we have the drinks before the award, people tend to not listen very carefully. And therefore, we decided to have the lecture and the formal part of the ceremony first to be followed by drinks and dinner. Sorry, that's the document. I mean, Roger's going to tell you more about that, but I just thought I'd mention the reason why we keep this somewhat formal is because we do think that this is a very important day for us to have Mr. Birla and the Honorable Union Minister for Law and Justice to share their thoughts with us, and to that extent we think it befits a formal sit-down ceremony where we hear what they have to say before we party. 25 years ago, we started Business India, and we drafted a credo for Business India. At that time, we said, Business India is a magazine with a commitment and a purpose. The commitment is to a belief in the future of Indian society, and the purpose of the magazine is to have an impact on the development and growth of society. The primary objective of the magazine is to create awareness and educate public opinion on critical issues and choices in business, industry, and the economy and society, to generate discussion and debate on politics and alternatives, and to provide a leadership of ideas in this regard. Business enterprise, whether in private or public sector, is a primary engine of industrialization and therefore of socio-economic change. Business and industry not only provide the major propelling force for development, but they also influence and determine the shape of social development, for better or for worse, in a variety of ways. Ideologies of the left, as well as the right, have proved to be equally barren in effecting solutions to the pressing problems of contemporary world. Yet they continue to dominate the thinking of our planners, decision makers, and academicians. Our job is to participate in evolving and actively championing new ideas, institutions, policy frameworks that will replace the reigning orthodoxies. A fundamental rethinking of the rationale and methods of state intervention in economic policy today is an urgent task, and one in which Business India will endeavor to play a creative role. One of our central and most important beliefs is that the means are as important as the ends, and is therefore necessary to constantly focus on the means employed, whether by business or by government, by management or labor, to achieve the state ends. Also, we believe that people should be treated as ends in themselves and never as a means. While practice inevitably falls short of this ideal and principle, offers an unfailing test of the rightness or otherwise of any given action. It's with this monumental task that we started Business India. We set ourselves a task, and I think, even if I say so myself, and on behalf of my colleagues, we have achieved it to some measure. The tribute that we're here today to pay to Mr. Kumar Birla, and the presence of all you gentlemen and ladies with us this evening, is an indication of the faith you've placed in us. Thank you once again for being with us today. To the Honourable Minister, one of the pleasant tasks I have is to introduce somebody who needs no introduction. Shri Arun Jaitley, who is with us today, has kindly consented to fly down from Delhi to be with us for this occasion. It is an honor again, not just to Business India and Kumar Mangalam Birla, but also to the business community as a whole, that he chooses to be with us today. Most of us are familiar with Shri Jaitley from his public statements, from his public utterances, and I remember meeting him first many, many years ago as a lawyer in the Supreme Court, where he ably argued a large number of cases. And I think the shortest introduction that needs to be made is that he continues to argue most effectively the case for this government and its policies. With these words, may I request Shri Arun Jaitley to address us. Thank you.
Madam Vilimoria, Mr. Sunil Mittal, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first at the very outset
thank Ashok for the invitation he extended to me to associate with this very important function today, where we honor Kumar as the business person of this year, 2003. There are a large number of very important similar awards being given, where industry and industry leaders are being honored. But yours perhaps is the oldest and amongst the most prestigious ones amongst them. I am particularly honored to be associated with this program because I think this is one of those rare functions where you actually honor somebody for the entrepreneurship which the person has displayed over the last few years. When Kumar Mangalam is being honored today, there are a few things that he represents. When a presentation was just being made, I noticed that his very distinguished father had been honored some years ago. I'm sure his grandparents present here and his mother present here would be honored with the fact that it's one of those rare occasions where the father and the son have been honored for the same distinction. Another first that you have from the list that I saw is that this is a kind of a lifetime achievement award. And if at the age of 36 you get that lifetime achievement award, Ashok is going to find it very difficult in the future years to find people younger than that who will be honored with this kind of a distinction. I remember having met Kumar for the first time a few years ago when I had just joined the government and he had a business oblique a legal issue with the government. And we spent a large part of the day together. We tried to resolve that issue in the law ministry before the day was over. And I was very personally impressed with the kind of clarity, dignity, fairness, even when there were issues against him, which came up in the course of that discussion. I'm associated in Delhi with a lecture that we organize every year for my old college. Next year we started that lecture, which is perhaps the only lecture where as a politician I preside and a business leader is invited to address. So I conferred upon Kumar the honor of delivering the inaugural address at Vigyan Bhavan for that lecture, and that was our first association at a function of this kind. We next shared the platform again in this very room, I think about 2 years ago, where he was then being honored by another organization. And I must confess that for people like him, even though I belong to the legal fraternity and am active in the political arena, I have developed a personal admiration. At times some people ask me as to who your role models in India today are. And I must straight away say that I have no one individual. It's very easy for us in politics to name either our leaders or one of the tall leaders of yesteryears. But the India that I see developing today, and if I am asked to focus on one single asset that this country has, I think this is this huge sense of entrepreneurship which is developing in India. And I have always privately said to myself, to my friends, and even publicly admitted it, that it's the Indian entrepreneur who is mine and should be the role model of others in my generation and perhaps the next generation. I remember reading last year a very interesting comparison being made about the speed at which the Indian and the Chinese economies have been growing. Now there were all kinds of arguments being given in favor of how fast the Chinese have grown. They developed world-class infrastructure for decades. We ignored it. We are just about getting to organize in that area now. But in the end, the very scholarly analysis said that whereas the Chinese model is now substantially FDI driven, it is substantially government driven, the fundamentals of the Indian model are sounder because it's entirely entrepreneur driven. And perhaps an entrepreneur driven model, if we are able to cover up the initial handicaps of lack of infrastructure and so on, and are able over the next decade to cover up in that area, has a much higher long-term sustainability. And with a word of this kind, I think it is the sense of entrepreneurship coupled with a very high sense of ethics. And of course, besides them, it's the kind of dignity and legacy that Kumar represents, for which I endorse what the jury headed by Sunil Mittal has really decided for this year's award. A brief comment on the years that we are passing through. I think when the history of India is written, let's say 2 decades down, these years which we are passing through are going to be very significant. Significant to the extent of almost being a turning point as far as the country is concerned. There were several opportunities we historically missed. And fortunately, some of those opportunities have come back to us. And when those opportunities have come back to us, it is these years which we are passing through which will really decide whether we are able to exploit to our entire advantage those opportunities which have come to us. When my friends in the political fraternity speak about the kind of improvements that have taken place in India over the last 1 decade, we start giving several micro illustrations. I don't think there is any need to repeat them. But the most significant changes that I see which are taking place now in India, not fully complete as yet, it will perhaps take us a few more years to do that. And I think this is one of the most significant changes which has taken place, particularly in the last few years. That sense of cynicism which existed in a large section of Indian society. It existed in our leaders, it existed in our media, it existed in our middle classes. It was even percolating to our youth. I see that sense of cynicism now being increasingly replaced by a new sense of confidence about India. And once this mindset changes, there are of course several obvious changes which take place because of this mindset change. Our ability to take decisions in India, as far as the government is concerned, substantially improves. The vision about India outside India substantially improves. And once this process starts happening, I think the kind of changes which we are going through, the best is then still to become. China did it, and we are almost in the process of rewriting the arithmetic of how the new growth rates take place. What would have appeared to be incredible, and I think this is a very encouraging sign, a year or 2 years ago, is the kind of figures we now talk about in sector after sector in the economy as a whole. I was very pleasantly surprised today morning when I read that the Prime Minister spoke of a growth rate. There were sections which were cynical about it. And today they said, yes, we can think of even achieving a higher growth rate than that. And if this kind of competitiveness starts coming, I think this becomes one of the first indicators that agendas of politics also start altering. And when those agendas of politics start altering, the key center stage agenda then is, how do I, when I get an opportunity in governance, do the most important thing, that is improve upon the quality of life of an average Indian. And that's what entirely political economy, crucial decision making, courage in those decision making, the direction of that change is entirely going to be. But I still see several areas of challenge. Agriculture, of course, I see as a great area of challenge. And I see over the next 10 decades, the next 1 decade, the next 10 years, a huge challenge about improving the quality of life as far as rural India is concerned. There are reform issues within the country. There are aberrations internationally with regard to that trade, which have adversely influenced us. And that's a huge battle for reform within and outside India that the country has to undertake. But if I keep that challenge aside for one moment, and that's a struggle which we still have to go through because that influences the largest number of people numerically in India. I see as encouraging trends what seems to be happening in other sectors. In the services sector, we were the first who noticed the kind of potential that we had. Perhaps our lack of physical infrastructure affected us adversely a little less in that sector. I recently have had a series of visitors from the United States. Members of their Congress came to me. They were here last month and they had a 1-hour question answer interaction with me. And at the very outset they said, we have 2 questions to ask you. First, do you realize that we have a serious problem about migration of jobs to your country in the United States, and that's not only an economic issue, it's becoming an important political issue. And secondly, we see in the long term, economies like yours and other neighbors of yours, as lower cost economies, being able in several products and services to outbeat us. We have huge manpower costs, we have huge environmental costs. And in our economy, all those costs are being adjusted. And therefore, how would you react to these issues of these costings being factored in as a part of the multilateral negotiations? Now, I took these 2 questions to me as a very powerful indicator of the things to come and how think tanks internationally are thinking about this. Fear after fear we had about opening out our economy, liberalizing domestically and otherwise, in several sectors have been proved wrong. We've done better in most of the areas where we overcame those initial fears. And perhaps it is now for the entire decision-making process in India to realize, I'm sure corporate leaders have begun to realize, the media has a very important responsibility in making people realize and creating a favorable public opinion in this, that the essence of the world today is that the entire concept of survival of the fittest is perhaps most relevant today in this international competitiveness. Countries after countries, consumers after consumers, companies after companies are going to go in for products, going to go in for services from wherever they believe they can get the best services or the best products at the cheaper prices. And perhaps with the kind of structure we have in India, that's an important roadmap that we have ahead of us. China used it to its advantage, started about 2 decades ahead of us, used it to its advantage and became a global factory. Initially, our serviced by India brand became more powerful than just the manufacturer in India. But then the later one is also now beginning in sector after sector to make its presence felt. And I think it is important that governments now realizing for the future that we have an important role of a facilitator. We still have a very important role in the social sector. We still have the prime responsibility of world-class infrastructure creation and then a policy domain in which we allow entrepreneurship in India to grow. And once we did that, I think this huge advantage we have in sector after sector of being a relatively low-cost economy can enable us to become world leaders. This realization is slowly creeping in. And it is this realization which is now responsible for this new arithmetic of growth rates that we are beginning to feel in India. And once that happens, I think over the next 1.5 to 2 decades, one of the most challenging periods in India's future history will perhaps be able to be on a roadmap. But I'm sure Kumar would find, Sunil would find, that there would be many more competitors even waiting to grow, compete with them and trying to outbeat them. Let me congratulate Kumar for this distinction at a very young age that he has achieved. It's indeed an honor, and let me congratulate his grandparents, his mother, his wife, who are all here, and I'm sure that they would all be very proud of his achievement at this young age. So thank you very much.
small token of appreciation from Ashok Advani to the Honorable Minister. Now we know why he was also so successful at the last round of WTO. Ladies and gentlemen, if I just say Sunil Bharti Mittal, I guess I need say no more. Except perhaps to remind you that he is the winner of the previous year's award, and the chairman of the panel of judges this year. And that at 45, he heads a successful enterprise with a market cap of approximately 1.5 billion US dollars and employing more than 5,000 people. And in a very short span of time, he has built a bouquet of very powerful leadership brands like Airtel, Touchtel, India One, PTEL, etc. Sunil has contributed significantly towards building India's telecom infrastructure, as well as towards reducing tariffs dramatically. Perhaps you could think of standing for elections at this popularity rate today. As Mukesh Ambani once remarked, Sunil is one of the brightest first-generation entrepreneurs that India has seen recently. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sunil Bharti.
Thank you. It's indeed an honor for me here this evening to address this august gathering of business leaders, friends. Honorable Minister Sri Arun Jaitley, Mr. Ashok Advani, Kumar, Birla, Ms. Birla, ladies and gentlemen. I do start with a bit of a handicap though, because my market cap has been reduced from 6 billion to 1.5 billion. I'll try to cover that during my speech. Hopefully by the end of it I will be back to 6 billion. This is a privilege that award winner gets. That is to speak twice, once when you win and once when you chair the jury. I am pleased that I am standing here in honoring one of the most exceptional business leaders of our times. I will walk the audience here today about what went through the minds of the jury members. But before that, let me mention that in the last 12 months, I've had the occasion of being on 5 jury panels, chairing 2 and being as a member of the other 3. In 3 of the panels, Kumar Birla's name came up in the final list, and he's won 2 of those awards, one of being Business India. In the 4th award, the name did not come up because it was a technology-related award in IT and telecom. But the way Kumar is now going in telecom, I think that award is going to beckon him next year. The 5th one, he would qualify, despite all his charm, and that was the Femina Miss India. Well, in most of these jury meetings, one thing which came up was his age. His young age was considered to be a reason for him to be parked for the next year. And perhaps the next year because he's rather young. And finally, the jury members saw what he was creating out there. In a very short span, he's created something extraordinary. There were no more reasons for the jury members of any of the jury not to start looking at Kumar Mangalam very seriously. The floodgates opened, and award after award in the last 12 months have come his way. But this award is really special. This indeed is special. Coming from a person who has had his fair share of awards, I can say with all honesty, this is one award that all of us in the business community truly look forward to. This is the one which all of us aspire to be conferred on one day. And therefore, when Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla's name was suggested to the jury by the magazine, a debate took place that he's got one of the other coveted awards this year. Should he therefore be considered for this award? The rules were very clearly laid out that no other award should eliminate anybody who is otherwise eligible to get this award. Likewise, it was also discussed that if somebody has picked up an award in the past, he should not be eliminated. One unique thing about the panel is, for the last 20 odd years, every year the panel is independent and different. No jury member has ever served twice on the same panel. And the discussion started in all due earnest. Nearly a dozen names were picked up. The jury consisted of some of the most eminent names in the country. Some of the jury members are here, present here today. Besides me, there were Mr. Lodha of Lodha and Company, Mr. Subhash Chandra of Z Telefilms, Mr. Venugopal Dhuth, Mihir Doshi of JMO Stanley, Sunil Munjal of Hero Group, and Mr. Arun Gandhi of Tata Sons. The selection process was tough. In fact, if I may use the word, the elimination process was tough. The names that were put out on the panel were really outstanding. But spending about an hour and a half, we brought the names down to 3. And then the most difficult task started, of eliminating 2 out of those 3 names. A debate, an animated debate started, a number of points were brought out in favor or against each of the members who were being selected. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, as they say, it was really no-brainer. Mr. Kumar Birla won hands down unanimously. I will share what went through my mind sitting in that jury meeting. I was looking at the hard task that the jury members had. It was indeed a very tough task because the people out there were all outstanding. To pick up one out of them was tough. But what went through my mind was the previous year the jury must have sat down. To have selected me as the businessman of the year 2002 was a very bold decision. I was, in a sense, saluting the jury in my mind for them having gone through illustrious names and having picked up me as a person who would win the award that year. What has this award meant for me? This award was conferred in a large gathering like this in Delhi by the Deputy Prime Minister, and it brought with it a lot of laurels but a big degree of responsibility. Because one of the major factors in giving out this award is sustainability of the business leader. And the last 1 year has been the most challenging year, personally for me and for Bharti Enterprises. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong in the last 12 months. Whether it was in the regulation, whether it was in the stock markets, whether it was in the tariffs, and more importantly, the intense competitive battle that we saw in the marketplace. There was a responsibility to be met. There was a responsibility which was being carried by every person in Bharti Enterprises, all those 10,000 people. And oddly enough, thus far this has been the most successful year for Bharti, and I personally feel that we have been able to carry the mantle of the responsibility of this award very well. In closing, I would like to say that Mr. Birla brings with him a very high degree of respect. More importantly, he carries with him a responsibility of changing India's economic climate. Very few families in the country can claim that they have made very deep impact on the economic quality of this country. The Birla family clearly has that one distinction of being one of those few families who have shaped the economic destiny of this country. Back in 96, I had the privilege of meeting your father, Mr. Aditya Birla, very briefly. I was in Taj in Bombay on a roadshow to raise some small money for my first publication. While I was waiting for the press people to join in, I learned that Mr. Birla was in the next big room. A press conference was to go underway very shortly. This was the time when Indo-Gulf fertilizer was being launched, the public issue of that company was being launched. I went into the room, I heard him speak. His vision, his passion, his warmth really deeply touched me. My investment banker briefly introduced me to him, and he very warmly encouraged me to go ahead and build my career. I didn't get a chance to see him again, but I'm very proud and pleased that I will have a chance to work with Kumar and Birla in shaping, to some extent, the economic destiny of this country. Thank you.
We will now request the chief guest to kindly present the event to Mr.
Down a bit so that the audience can see, please. Kindly go down. One second, sorry. Kindly sit down, please. Sorry. Come on. Come sit down, please. A bit. Sit down a bit.
As a wealth of meaning. While Kumar means young, Mangalam encompasses tranquility, prosperity, happiness, and well-being. One could not ask for more, can one? In the 8 years he's been at the helm, the turnover has increased fourfold from 7,250 crore in 1995 to over 27,000 crore today. Almost all the group companies have grown both top and bottom line, despite falling tariffs, 9/11, and the demand recession. And more of them are torchbearers of global quality standards. The Aditya Birla Group spans Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Egypt, Canada, US, the UK, Australia. But despite his many commitments on the boards of so many blue chip companies, including Tata Steel and Maruti Udyog, he is the Prime Minister's Advisory Council of Trade and Industry, the Chairman of SEBI's Committee on Corporate Governance, the Chairman of SEBI's Committee on Insider Trading. He is also an Honorary Fellow of the London Business School and a member of the Advisory Board of the London Business School. Incidentally, he earned his MBA also at the London Business School. But apart from profits, quality benchmarks, the Aditya Birla Group manages to attract the best people in every field. His ethics, his integrity, and his vision for not just his group and the communities in which he operates, but also for the country. Most of all, like his father, he has that one cutting-edge instinct that our cricketers so severely lack, the killer instinct. Ladies and gentlemen, the Business India Business Person of the Year Award, please welcome Kumar Mangalam Birla.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking Business India and the jury for bestowing this honor on me. The first thing I did on being given this good news was to scout for the December 1990 issue of Business India, which had my father on its cover as its Businessman of the Year. I remember being suffused by a sense of great pride and jubilation then, and wondering if I would ever similarly be featured by Business India. I'm acutely aware of the fact that I don't stack up to the stature of my predecessors to this award, Sunil, but I draw solace from the fact that my contribution lies in bringing down the average age of the awardees of this award quite substantially. So however cliche it might sound, I must say that this is a dream come true. I feel both deeply honored and humbled to have been named Business India's 22nd Businessman of the Year. In the same breath, I have to say that I received this award on behalf of each member of the Rising Sun, the Aditya Birla Group, call it the United Fraternity or the Aditya Birla family. The award is truly and completely a tribute to their missionary zeal and unflinching commitment. What makes this award even more special is that I am receiving it from Mr. Arun Jaitley. Mr. Jaitley provides an outstanding example of how integrity and competence can be dovetailed in public life and how power can be used for the good of the people. It's also a privilege to have Sunil here. Sunil is an icon of Indian business who I believe has brought all of India closer by enticing all of us to express yourself. Sometime back, after addressing a distinguished audience like we have today, a lady walked up to me and complimented me on my speech, saying that it was both good and original. But before I could start dreaming, she quickly added that the parts that were good were not original, and those that were original were not good. So having learned my lesson, I've decided to be neither good nor original today, but to just say it like it has been. I thought I would share with you today the journey of our group over the past 10 years, and also a bit about the path that we have chalked out for ourselves going forward. Let me begin by saying that ours is a rather simple story. It is not a saga of getting right up there from being nowhere, or of a dramatic turnaround, or of a brilliant startup. Ours is a story of a 140-year-old organization, a story of remaining successful even as the business milieu changed irrevocably. Having said that, let me hasten to add that we have learned from first-hand experience that success can be fleeting, elusive, and it needs constant working upon. Apart from the set of core values and beliefs that have been our anchor, as an organization we have changed in very fundamental ways in the last 10 years. We have changed in terms of the kind of people we recruit, our demographic profile, the way we view success and measure our performance, in terms of our business portfolio, in how we discern our future, and in the geographical contours of our reach. More importantly, we have changed in the way that we are perceived as a corporate entity. When I assumed responsibility of the group in 1995, it was under trying personal circumstances. I am myself with faith in God, faith in what I have learned from my father in the 5 years that I worked so closely with him, from my education and the love and support of my family. The organization stood behind me like a rock, for which I will always remain grateful. With faith was a dash of a fatalistic streak that I think comes with personal loss at a young age. So at that time I was working on a model that was 80% faith and 20% fatalism. It was soon apparent to me that it was not just my family and I who had suffered a loss. In fact, the whole organization was in mourning. In meeting after meeting, people broke down on remembering their mentor, my father. Most had anecdotes to tell of how he had personally impacted their lives and their careers. Clearly, emotions did not just matter, but mattered a lot. I was rather fresh from an MBA that emphasized on hard numbers and strategy, and de-emphasized human emotions and feelings as soft issues, but the ground reality before me was wholly different. It was this huge emotional equity and bonding between my father and the organization that saw me through my first 2 years. Much like an arranged match, the organization and I were getting to know each other. Although I had responsibility for a clutch of business units for some years, to a large part of the group, I was an unknown quantity. There were concerns, some shared and some unsaid. The getting to know each other phase had its moments of anxiety and anticipation. To many, this new chairman seemed very different from his father. The warmth and charisma of a towering personality was missed. This new chairman rarely wore a tie, leave alone a suit. However, he was businesslike, perhaps too much so. He did call every now and then to inquire after plant-related issues, almost as if they weren't his problems at all. Hopefully, though, he had the right gene pool. As they got to know him more, it was apparent that he wasn't a rookie. He worked late into the night, 7 days a week, kept up the schedule, asked a lot of questions, listened a lot. At the end of the day, he always got the team to take a decision after a constructive decision. He was clearly not a fence sitter. In the first 2 years, we were impacted by externalities beyond our control. We had floods in one important factory site, drought in another, a major fire in the third, and a serious breakdown in the fourth. As if on cue, the Southeast Asian crisis came upon us, impacting our businesses across Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Clearly, things were not going our way. It was with ingenuity, sheer hard work, and utter doggedness that the operating teams of these businesses overcame these hurdles, and not only that, they continued to grow their businesses. These setbacks, in a sense, renewed our self-confidence in handling complex situations deftly and with extreme competence. The Southeast Asian businesses emerged out of their crisis completely unscathed. In a landscape of bankruptcies and defaults, they kept their commitments to their banks without a day's delay in paying back a single dollar. It was a true feather in their cap, a testimony of the group's resilience, and earned us much kudos in the region. It was in those testing times that I got a full flavor of what this organization was all about. It had discipline embedded into its genetic coding. It's tough when your point of view is not concurred with whilst taking an important call. Yet I cannot recall a single instance when every member of a team did not go out, all guns blazing, to see the team's final decision through to its final fruition. Innovation, lateral thinking, project management, productivity, cost focus, and asset sweating were our clear strengths. For areas that were not our strong points, we had to import skills from the outside. Slowly but surely, a very homogeneous group of people began to morph into a much more diverse and heterogeneous entity. 2 years into my new job and the dust was beginning to settle, the organization and I had come to know each other much better. There was an acceptance of the fact that the new economic order meant that our success formula would have to be reworked. When an economy moves from being insular to integrating with the rest of the world, surely an organization, which is a microcosm of the economy, must also change. The role of the leader or the CEO would have to be redefined to accommodate the changed environment with many more and varied demands on his time. There was now realization that there was no hidden agenda, no old guard versus new, and no inconsistency between what was said and what actually happened. There was now faith that decisions were taken in the best interest of the organization and with the dignity of the individual uppermost in mind. This surely was the quintessential Aditya Birla way, now deeply ingrained in our corporate consciousness. I felt like a big burden had been lifted off my shoulders. My intake of aspirins dropped and I began to sleep much better. From the stages of brainstorming and agenda forming, clearly the team was now in the phase of performing. In these last 9 years, we have worked incessantly to try and make the Aditya Birla Group a great place to work in. In one sentence, we have sharply focused on creating a meritocracy. For us, this meant putting in place systems to induct the right talent, for spotting and tracking nascent talent, for creating leaders with a cocktail of skills who had exposure to different functions, businesses, and countries. In short, we have tried to cater to the dreams of people, not just to their needs, by creating an ambiance that enables talent to bloom. Those with talent to perform and bond with the values of the organization must naturally bubble up right to the top. Not only that, find in the fertile ethos of the group a career that is personally rewarding and professionally enriching. We have tried to create a culture that signals Roko Mat, आगे बढ़ने दो, as opposed to the ROCO, mat aage बढ़ने दो culture that so many organizations fall prey to. I do believe that we have met with considerable success on this front. Clearly, our brand as an employer across levels has grown. At most leading management and technology institutes, we have moved from being, say, a day 3 or a day 4 company to a day 0 or a day 1 company. The new world of business also called for greater levels of autonomy and decentralization across the organization. At the same time, we needed checks and balances in place and a sense of common identity and direction. Towards this objective, the last 8 years have also seen the emergence of an activist corporate center, along with greater autonomy and accountability for the group's diverse and growing businesses. We changed our performance measure from the legendary Parda to EVA to focus on the need of value creation for our stakeholders, thus institutionalizing contemporary systems that ensure organizational discipline yet leave room for individual creativity has been an area of priority for us. Another area of extreme emphasis has been to customerize. When you move from a situation of rationing your production to having to market it, it's a leap that takes enormous amount of energy and effort. We have constantly and consciously spruced up our effort at becoming solution providers to our customers and to their customers as well. Amongst them, files, industrial gases, rubber gloves, seawater Indonesia, and petroleum refining. These have been some defining moments for the group. For example, the stealth and speed of the acquisition of Indal from Alcan was like a shot of adrenaline, whilst an exercise like the shutting down of our operations in Birla meant really tough and protracted deliberations with the state government, a test of nerve. However, each experience for us has been worth 1,000 words. Creating and dressing a cement entity with global standing and transforming Hindalco into a non-ferrous metal entity with global visibility have been time-consuming but rewarding experiences. In the meantime, the growth of some of our businesses meant that we had to spread our presence overseas far beyond Southeast Asia. The acquisition of Atholville Pulp in Canada returned us our investments many times over in the first 2 years of its operations itself. Carbon Black in Egypt has grown 8 times over in the last 5 years. Our mines in Australia hold great promise, far exceeding our expectations, and Carbon Black in China is for us a beachhead into the country that promises to become the world's largest economy in the next 1 generation. Corporate groups do not operate in a vacuum. They reflect and define the economic environment that they inhabit. Some years ago, an American industrialist met an Indian official during a visit to New Delhi. And he said to him, "I'm very impressed with what I've seen here, but tell me how best can I make a small fortune here?" "The best way to end up with a small fortune here," replied the Indian official, "is to come into India with a large one." This defeatist mindset has been replaced by a new assertive self-confidence in India's ability to deliver. The Birla Group is fortunate that as we reach the cusp of a new global growth and opportunity, the Indian economy too has entered a decisive new phase. As a nation, I believe we are at a landmark in our history. India is poised to enter an era of exceptional and sustained economic growth that will have dramatic and profound implications, not just for Indian business, but also for the Indian people. Let me illustrate what I mean by just citing 2 empirical examples. Assuming an average annual growth rate in GDP of 5% over the next few decades, eminently sustainable given the current trend of economic reforms, India's GDP will roughly double every 14 years. Currently, our GDP adjusted for purchasing power parity is $2.95 trillion. Based on these projections, India's GDP as we approach the 100th anniversary of its independence in 2047 would be around $24 trillion. Independent calculations show that by this time, American GDP, which is currently $12 trillion, would at an assumed average annual growth rate of 2% has nearly doubled to $24 trillion by 2047, the same as India. This is a remarkable statistic and based on credible empirical data and extrapolation. It demonstrates that in just over one generation, India's GDP could well approach America's GDP to become the world's second largest economy after China, whose GDP then, according to these calculations, would be $32 trillion. Linear projections such as these sometimes miss out on the characteristics of an economy that is at the takeoff stage, which is perhaps where India is today. After per capita GDP reaches a certain threshold, higher purchasing power kicks in and growth tends to accelerate. An example of such an outstanding and remarkable transformation is South Korea, which graduated from being a less developed country to an OECD member in less than 3 decades. Yet another factor that will reinforce this dynamic is demographics. Demographic trends are in India's favor. It is projected that by 2050, India will have the largest number of young people in the world below 25 years and the largest number of people in the productive age group of 20 to 60 years, 800 million. Global trends are such that large investable capital in countries with aging populations will need to be invested in high growth areas, India among them. Also, labor shortages in the developed economies will continue to drive the flow of labor-intensive services from places like India. The confluence of these factors, reaching a takeoff point, favorable demographics, and complementarity between countries in labor and capital availability and requirements will propel India's growth, making it the global force our history has destined us to be. I believe this unfolding growth of India's diverse economy will present global scale opportunities for a global business Indian group like ours. However, before dwelling on the future, let me focus very briefly on where we are at the present moment. The year that has gone by, I believe, has been a watershed year for the group because in this year we have seen the last of the major restructuring initiatives that we needed to undertake. As an organization, we have emerged stronger, fitter, and a leader in many ways. We have successfully carried out a deep restructuring. We have set our house in order. We are positioned in almost all of our businesses at the cusp of a great growth opportunity. Our businesses are globally efficient, our balance sheets are healthy, and the group's cash flow generation is sizable. Much of the consolidation is behind us. Today, we stand at an inflection point. This is the right time to catch the tide and to catapult the group into the future. As the world becomes one market, growth is not an option, but an imperative. For us, there is no dearth of opportunity. The options before us are many, but we have to make the right choices, time them right, and move with speed, agility, and decisiveness. At the same time, we have to raise the bar and to stretch the canvas manifold when it comes to envisioning our future. I believe that it is imperative for us to look at growth on an altogether different plane and in a significantly altered dimension. To drive home this aspect, let me just give you 3 examples of the extent to which we as a group will raise the bar in terms of our future performance for the rest of this opportunity-rich decade. One, if you look across the swath of the largest businesses in our portfolio, there is a marked process of consolidation in almost all of the industries we are in, both domestically and internationally. Logically speaking, therefore, growth in the next part of the decade should occur at a higher plane, given the opportunities available. Whilst over the past 5 years, the CAGR of group turnover in India and overseas has been 22%, for the rest of the decade, we peg our target much higher. 2, today, 30% of our turnover comes from our overseas operations. This perhaps makes us the only truly Indian multinational group today. Will this number change in the next 6 years? I believe it will. For example, our ambition to become a regional player in the aluminum business will mean that we may need to make investments across the globe, closer to the consumer markets for our end products. In the last 1 year alone, our investments overseas have been rupees 1,500 crores. So for these and more reasons, I believe that from a 30% share, the share of our overseas businesses will increase to close to 40% of our total turnover by the turn of the decade, and that too on a much larger base. And finally, 3, being essentially a people's organization, we will reprioritize our attention in the people area. The focus on managerial capability will be much sharper. We will build capabilities not for an Indian manager who works internationally, but for a global manager who happens to be an Indian. As of now, 12,000 of the group's 72,000 employees are drawn from 20 different foreign nationalities. However, by 2010, I believe our employee profile would have further undergone a transformation with even more variety and even more depth. Leadership performance will be assessed as much on talent retention and leadership development as on strategy implementation and financial performance. I could go on, but coming to the bottom line, the point I wish to drive home is that this is the time for us as a group to embark on a new growth paradigm by constantly questioning our existing cerebral models and expanding our intellectual horizons. I believe scaling up our vision of what we can be in the future is the key to making the leap of faith that we have so successfully taken in the past. I firmly believe that our work over the rest of the decade would catapult the group into the same league as the leading Fortune 500 companies in every way that counts. That is the challenge that we are faced with. Finally, feeling gratitude and not expressing it, it is said, is like wrapping a present and not giving it. I pay homage to my great-grandfather, Birla, for imprinting his extraordinary legacy on the group, a legacy by whose principles we live and work even today. This is an opportunity for me to thank my family for always being there for me unconditionally and for taking my failures and triumphs in their stride always. And finally, I wish to dedicate this award to my father, my greatest guru, the late Aditya Vikram Birla. Thank you.
So well spoken, so well said. And now, ladies and gentlemen, may I request Mrs. Feroza Bilamoria to propose a vote of thanks.
I'm glad I only had to give a vote of thanks because after those 3 brilliant speeches, I think I'd have crawled under the table if I was to make a speech now. But I'm delighted to present this vote of thanks. I want to start with the Honourable Minister. I know the trouble that we put you through to make you come here today. I know you had to readjust your schedule quite a lot for us, and I really do appreciate that. And my colleagues from Business India also do, the graciousness with which you shifted your program to tomorrow and get this day free for us. Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for sharing your vision for the future of India. For us, because it's the beginning of the 27th year, not the 25th, of Business India. 26 years and 1 day ago, just about this time, the first red copies of the magazine were coming off the press. We had J.R.D. Tata on the cover, I remember. Huge coup in those days because nobody thought that we'd be able to pull off a magazine of this kind. Nobody felt there was a need for it even, I remember. And I had the onerous task of going out trying to get advertising, so I know how tough it was. But here we are on our 26th anniversary, and I'm glad it worked out this way. Thank you once again for being with us. Sunil, when Ashok informed you that you were going to be Businessman of the Year, he told you that you had 3 or 4 duties to perform, and that was to make yourself available for the cover story at short notice, to present your delivery or acceptance speech, and chair the next year's panel, and of course be here to hand over the baton to Kumar. And to say you've done that with great aplomb. We've loved having you as a part of our family, and we look forward to a relationship right through the future. Kumar, my gosh, that speech was brilliant. As I said to you, all of us are complex. No wonder you are where you this, but that was a brilliant speech, a brilliant presentation. I've really enjoyed interacting with you over the last 1 month, 1.5 months, and the thing that struck me the most about you is your humility and your gentle manners. It's amazing that you have the humility that you do, knowing where you are today. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to also thank our sponsors. We've been very lucky in getting such a warm response. Ashim, you came through almost immediately. Venugopaji, I can't see us having a Business of the Year do without Videocon being a sponsor. The same for Rabobank, Rana, thank you. You were with Rabo when we requested you to sponsor this. The Grover, Vineyards, UDB, and of course Oberoi Hotels. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. We're going to break for drinks and dinner now. Both the Minister and Kumar will be with us through dinner and drinks. The night is young. Have a great time. Thank you.